Greetings. Greetings. Father Mark signing on, continuing the course on the Fathers of the Church. We left off last time with the death of Pope Sylvester I on December 31st, 335, followed as Pope 34 by St. Mark. There's no numeral after his name because so far he's the only Pope Mark. Reigned from January 18th, 335 to 336, January 18th, 336 through October 7th, 336. He was a priest of Rome. He was the first pope elected after the conclusion of the First Ecumenical Council, Nicaea I. His reign included beginning the process of implementing procedures that characterize the public operation of the church post-legalization and post-council. For example, he began the practice of bestowing the pallium on the bishops of metropolitan cities. In the first video on Pope Sylvester, we covered Nicaea and one of the canons about that. So we covered what a metropolitan diocese was, essentially the senior diocese in a province. The pallium is a band of white cloth, like a broad collar, worn around the neck, with a strip, another hanging down the front and the back. It's supposed to. It's like a stylized yoke, like an ox's yoke, to pull the. And it's pierced. It has crosses, and each cross has a needle going through it to symbolize the nails of Christ. And this still is right. So those of you who visit St. Peter's in Rome, you have the high altar, under the baldacchino, Bernini's baldacchino above the high altar, under the dome. In other words, so this is not the altar against the wall, where you have the throne of St. Peter's being held up by the four doctors of the church. That's in the apse, but this is the altar under the dome, under the baldacchino. So if you look under that, there's a stairway leading down, and at the base of the stairway there's an opening, and right under and you see there's behind a glass there's a case, and in the case, well, you can't see that but in the case are these pallia. So once a year, there's a special order of nuns that does this. They make the pallia. They're blessed on St. Agnes's feast day, and they're stored there. And then on the feast of St. Peter and Paul, every year, those who are going to be made archbishops, which is what that's how we refer to the metropolitan archdiocese now as archdiocese. Those who are going to be archbishops receive the pallium in Rome. So that goes back to 336. Further, Pope Mark commissioned scholars to compile a necrology of bishops and martyrs. Necrology is just a list of death dates, so their name and their dates of death. And provinces, still, each province is supposed to, ecclesiastical province is supposed to maintain a necrology of the deaths of bishops, priests, and deacons. Let's see. It probably must be in the sacristy. And the ordos, that your province puts out, that's where it should be. So in each date, in addition to the liturgical information you need for the day, this should also be either on a facing page or in footnotes, the name of bishops, priests, deacons in the province who died on that date. So you can, unless the mass, unless it's a feast or something, where the mass has to be offered for something specific, you can offer up a votive mass for them, or at least mention them, in the prayers for the day. Further, Pope Mark stipulated that the Bishop of Ostia, now it's Ostia Antica, which was the port of ancient Rome, that he would be the senior prelate of the minimum of 3 co-consecrating bishops for after future papal elections, those who would consecrate the new pope. Okay, so back to the Arian problem. 335, the Arians in favor in Constantinople, because of their influence over Constantia, the emperor's half-sister, concocted a new strategy to use against Athanasius. He became the target because he was, not only had he successfully defied them and outmaneuvered them in their first attempt at false accusations, but he was seen as the senior, the defender of Nicene orthodoxy, and he's bishop of the home diocese of Arius, where Arius was still not welcome. So since the Arians had been initially condemned by local synods, the first at Alexandria and a second at Antioch, and then by a council, the Ecumenical Council of Nicaea, the Arians decided that they would use these same constructs, corrupt them from within, and twist them to their own purposes. Remembering, that now we have to separate ourselves from the American system of separation of church and state. That did not exist in the ancient world, and just the idea would have made no sense to anyone, even pagans. It wouldn't have made sense to. So remember that the decisions of these church councils and synods were post-legalization were enforced by the coercive apparatus of the empire. That imperial magistrates would enforce the decisions. With this in mind, the Arians manipulated bishops, not every one of them, but some bishops in Syria and Palestine, or the Holy Land, Syria and the Holy Land, to convene a synod to meet in Tyre, Tyre. That's in present-day Lebanon. But at the time, remember, the Syria, Lebanon, and the Holy Land, it was all part of the Roman province of Syria. There, they brought new false accusations against Athanasius, and once again, the emperor ordered his appearance. As now, you can't just say it's false and not show up to court. You still have to show up. This time, they escalated. This time, Athanasius was accused of murder. They accused him of murdering a schismatic Egyptian bishop named Arsenius, and cutting off one of his hands to use in a satanic rite. Now, while on trial, while he traveled, because he had to travel from Alexandria in Egypt to Constantinople in Greece. So one of his deacons, the same guy, was a retired centurion, tracked down the alleged murder victim, Arsenius, who was hiding in a heretical monastery. So this deacon brought Arsenius all the way to Constantinople, where Athanasius was on trial for killing this same guy, Arsenius. So he was able to present, here's the dead guy, you see, walking around, breathing, and look, both hands, I did not cut off one of his hands to use in a satanic ritual. So that was accompanied by a letter signed by many of the clergy and the faithful, the lay faithful in Alexandria, reporting a pattern, a long-standing and escalating pattern of intimidation and bribery used to fabricate false accusations against Athanasius. So Constantine, now he's mad, you see. He's not a theologian, but he, as we covered, previously, he spent a lot of time reuniting the empire, and trying to manipulate the courts, the Roman courts. That was not something he would take lightly. So he demanded that the Arian bishops who made these charges come before him to account for their actions. So they did, and they abandoned their initial claims. They said, we're here in Constantinople. We were just informed of this, so we reported it in good faith. So obviously we were wrong, but it was not intentional. Yeah. Then they come up with another false accusation. This time they accuse Athanasius of plotting to lead a coup d'etat in Egypt, to overthrow, in other words, take over Egypt and to lead it to secede from the empire, and therefore cut off the grain supply from the Nile River to the empire. Now this is preposterous, as all the others. But this one gave Constantine pause. You remember that's how Constantine came to power, as a usurper. So he would take that seriously, that somebody else might try the same thing. Now Athanasius responded, pointing out that it wasn't even possible for him to do that. That it was so ludicrous, even if he wanted to, which he did not. But by this point, Constantine had enough. He didn't believe it; otherwise, he would have just killed Athanasius. But just for the sake of getting these people, clearing his desk of this problem, including his sister. Remember, his sister, or half-sister, Constantia, is on the side of the Arians. So to shut them all up, he exiled Athanasius from Alexandria, Egypt, to Trevivorum in Gaul. That's present-day Trier in the Rhineland. This act, of course, this exile, was completely unjust, but it had the historic benefit of bringing many Western bishops into personal contact with the great Athanasius. This is also a period of enforced, rest, in a sense that he was, forcibly kept away from his pastoral duties as bishop. But he figured, well, he'll serve the church in another way. This gave him time to compose two very important works of dogmatic theology, both of which are referred to in the intro to Athanasius' life. One, Against the Pagans, and The Incarnation of the Word, in both of which he defends Nicene Christology. On Saturday, in the winter of the year 336, Arius, the arch-heretic, died in Constantinople. So Constantine, as Arius was living in Nicomedia with his supporter, the Bishop Eusebius, who was Bishop of Nicomedia. So he was closer to Constantinople. And so Constantine said, okay, that he should be readmitted to communion, and we'll do it here in the New Rome, in Constantinople. So on a Saturday, the day before, the next day, Arius was going to attend Sunday Mass in one of the churches that Constantine, built in Constantinople, and receive communion. Well, no, we're told that it was in September, in 335. On his way, before he actually entered the church, he was overcome with a need to relieve nature, calling of nature, of the excretory system. And we're told by multiple sources that in addition to the ordinary effluvia of such an action, that Arius's entire intestines came out as well. Obviously he died, hemorrhaged to death. So we find this in Socrates Scholasticus, Socrates of Constantinople, in his church history, Book 1, chapters 5 through 38, talks about Athanasius and Arius, culminating with, well, not culminating, because Athanasius continued to live. It's also in a later, a Palestinian, from Gaza, he's from the Holy Land, but present-day Gaza. Also wrote a work titled The Church History, and he mentions this in Book 1, chapters 15 through 21, and in Book 2, chapters 27 through 30. Okay, this is also the year that Pope Mark died. The OP, the Liber Pontificalis, tells us that he was born in the city of Rome. His father's name was Priscus. Let's see, we covered that. He built 2 basilicas, one on the Via Ardentiana, which is the Church of Santa Balbina, and the other in the city of Rome in Palacinus, which is on the site is currently a church of St. Mark, San Marco, in Rome. Though the current building does not date from that, but the site does. He was buried. Pope Mark was buried in the catacombs in the cemetery of St. Balbina, which was near the catacombs of Pope Callistus. The cause of death unknown, but he's died on October 6th, and he was interred on October 7th, 336, after a reign of 8 months and 26 days. Followed as Pope 35 by St. Julius I. So we'll conclude here and move on to Pope Julius next time. For now, thank you for your attention. This session is adjourned.